And welcome back to the KidFirst Sports Podcast. I am your host, Coach Dave Aceleros. To get ready for today's guest, and because my nephew is a total stud, last night I went to his freshman football game. It has been many, many years since I watched the American version of football live at a high school level. It was an absolute blast. Of course, while I was there, it's hard to take my KidFirst hat off. So I was observing parent and coach behavior, how the kids talked to each other and interacted. There was one particular dynamic that hopefully me and my guest will talk about a little bit later that was different than some of the other sports I've been going to: volleyball, basketball, soccer, things like that. So with that, we're going to jump in. My guest today is Antone Wilson, all the way from Boston, Massachusetts. I think you are my first guest from that far away. Welcome.
Awesome. Happy to be here, man. And it's interesting because Boston is home. However, I've never lived here as an adult. So it's interesting in even claiming this city, but it's a phenomenal place. And I'm happy to be here on this podcast today.
It's awesome, man. I've been there, visited. I went to law school up in Connecticut in Hartford. So we would go visit Boston and for different things. And I just remember it being, well, first of all, they were in the middle of the Big Dig back then. And I assume it's done. Is it done now? I mean, it's only been like 18 years since then.
There's always construction going on in the city. I do believe that project is done. Anyhow, they are always expanding. In the city, there's always traffic and all sorts of roads closed, making things difficult.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's why life goals in Boston is own a helicopter. So, well, anyway, Antone, I'm super excited to see you. We met. I think it was on LinkedIn. I don't remember. Did you reach out to me or did I reach out to you? I can't remember.
I believe you had reached out to me, leaving a comment on one of my posts. And then I saw shortly thereafter that you had a podcast, was really intrigued by some of the things that you were doing. And I believe I reached out to you and there was immediately synergy between us.
I love it. This is, I'm not a huge social media fan in general, but I mean, there's definitely uses. I have met more cool people on LinkedIn. And one of the things is that I love, and this just happened yesterday again, you see people who make a comment about something, you're like, oh my gosh, that's something I'm really interested in. And then you drop a post or a comment or you private message, and people are like, yeah, let's talk. I mean, it's awesome. Sometimes it feels a little like insular or hard to connect or network with people. But if you find something that you have in common that you feel passionately about with somebody, and you're just like, hey, can we talk about this? There was no hesitation from you or me. Like, yeah, man, let's talk. This is awesome. So once again, get out there, meet people, take a chance. Say like, hey, Antone, you want to talk about this? I have some questions for you. People say yes. They say yes.
Absolutely. And, expand on that is that I believe like attracts like. And what are your values and how do you display that on your social media platform? And if you're fairly active on there and you are intentional, it's easy to identify like-minded people, people who are on that same frequency as you. And so when you reach out to them, well, of course, you guys are on the same page. You can establish that. And so, it may be difficult to detect, who's real or who's on the same page as you or not. However, I feel like if you're intentional with your actions and your behaviors online, you're always going to attract the right people. And it's a beautiful.
Yeah. What a great insight. Yeah. And there's always room for posting, really funny cat memes or whatever. Those are awesome too. But I think to include a little bit of who you are, that's a good thing, right? It's not just funny videos, but a little bit of who you are. And it didn't take me long to see that Antone was a guy I wanted to talk with. And I think we have similar mindset on things. So Antone is the podcast's first football coach guest. And like I said, mostly I've been in the soccer world and some of these other sports, but I've been wanting to open this conversation up with football because, generally speaking, football is kind of like the most masculine kind of alpha type of sport in America. And it attracts, as we all know, it also kind of attracts that super high intensity level of parents and coaches. We've all seen the pictures and the videos, and we've been there ourselves. We've heard from the stands. So I wanted to start getting my foot into this realm where I haven't been, and start seeing how would KidFirst concepts resonate in American football. And so when Antone and I spoke, now a couple of weeks ago, to get to know each other a little bit, he used a phrase, and I'm going to steal that and use it for the title of the podcast today. And he said, "Let's wake up football." That's what you said. And that stuck with me. I'm like, let's wake up football. Why does football need to be woken up?
Well, it's a deep one. Great first question. Let's look at what football really is. It's a human chess match. It's tactical warfare. No other sport allows participation. You can have a team of roughly 100 guys. No other roster is that big. Okay, I kind of compare it to the military. And so when a young man takes on that journey, if they want to play at the Pop Warner level, you're going to get physical pretty early, or at least play in high school. That's going to be your first exposure to getting knocked on your butt, being a member of a team, having to play a role. And if you don't play, you have to fall in line with playing a role on that team very, very quickly. Which can be, difficult for kids because everyone wants to necessarily be the star. Outside of the quarterback, everyone has a role to play, and you have to establish how you fit within that dynamic. Now, for many of the coaches that get into, many of the guys that get into coaching, they're former athletes, and a lot of them come from older generations now, obviously, as time passes by. And so a lot of them, depending on where you grow up, were coached really, really difficult. And sports can have a profound impact on us. But what I find in the game of football is that a lot of coaches tend to take this mentality of like, you got to go be really, really hard. You got to be rugged. We got to push you till failure. It's like brute force, physical. And I find that it's often neglected the aspect of personal development. And so where it creates an opportunity for a ton of kids, it also neglects the various aspects of character and, personal development, being a member of a team. So what I find now in American football is that it's a conglomerate. It's a monopoly. Nowhere else in the world are they going to challenge the NFL. And therefore, the owners can behave however they want. Now, what that does is, what is the player union like? What is it like being a professional NFL player? Now, the public perceives that to be this glorious job. However, if you're a player on the league minimum, you're barely making $350K. Not to mention that the average career spans about 3 years. So there's a high likelihood in which the average kid is not going to go pro. And if they get there, they're not going to be there for a very long time. Dialing back, and I'm going to synthesize this, but there are 5 levels of college football to play. You can play Division I, 2, or 3. Division I can be split up into FCS and FBS, which is a lower tier, but still Division I. You have junior college, and you have NAIA. It's all different levels of football. Now, let's put something into perspective. There's over 100 colleges at every single level. So there's got to be over 750 places in America post-high school that you can play football. And every roster, on average, let's say has 40 to 75 kids, sometimes more, sometimes less. Well, putting this into perspective, there are well over 200,000 college football players probably in America, or at least high school and college for sure. All these kids are going to get to experience the game. However, very few are going to get a chance to, play at the pinnacle.
Get to the top.
Now, that game demands so much more from you than any other sport. You only get one game day. Very, very short season. You got to weight train. You got to know plays. It's almost like having a full-time job. You're asking this of a 14-year-old. And so what is that experience going to be like? That is such a vital part of any kid's development, bearing at whatever level that they get at, to allow them to develop as quality people and contributors into society. And with all these variables and making football this conglomerate, there is a massive gap between the elite and who is rewarded and the resources that are accessible and an infrastructure in place to provide for all the other people that are going to participate within the game that have to go on in life because they are not going to be able to play forever. And I believe that where we're at as a society, that is just entirely lost. And who suffers? The players and the coaches that are at that lower level, that are broken, that are underpaid, that have some trauma that wasn't attended to, or were poorly coached. And it creates this compound effect, which I believe is a microcosm of the macrocosm, which is a byproduct of, I believe, a lot greater issues as we talk about the landscape of the American economy.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of things in there. I want to, you started off with this concept of kind of the bifurcation of physical versus emotional or character coaching, right? So you're in football, and this is true with all sports, right? The sport is, the coach's job is, at least in part, to teach the sport, to teach the techniques and the tactics and the physicality that's required to play this sport. That's their job. For too long, many coaches, and we'll stay with American football, and this isn't based on my own experience, this is what you're telling me. The focus has been too heavily on teaching the game of football, the skills, the techniques, the tactics, the physicality, right? The kind of the mindset required to succeed at the game of football. Why do you think that sport in particular, because there's other sports I've looked at that do a little bit better job, I think, of thinking about the whole kid, not just their physical skills or their physical strength. Why do you think football struggles with that?
Well, for one, I'd say this actually. Football is probably one of the easier sports to pick up and play pretty quickly. If you're naturally gifted, you can be pretty good.
Athletically, right? Because it's a big focus on strength, speed, size, agility, things like that. Yeah.
So you don't have to do, the redundant hitting, field work, shooting that's required in a lot of sports. Now, to dive in your question, you said, why are the aspects of character development not emphasized as much as skill development? I believe it really just boils down to wins and losses and how competitive the sport is and how it's emphasized. Because like even at the high school level, if football wins, everybody wins. That's the money driver.
That's a really good point.
More so a matter in smaller colleges. So it's more so a matter of like, how quickly can we put a group of guys on the field? What do we do well? If we have one star player, let's give him the ball and let's just ride it till the wheels fall off. A lot of coaches also tend to think, there's an emphasis on the physical, the speed, the let's gain size.
Yeah.
But there actually is not an emphasis on the tactics, the skill development.
Okay.
And you actually see an impact in the quality of player development, whether it be the reads that quarterbacks have to make, or the game has been really, really simplified and dumbed down. And I feel like there's such turnover in coaching. Coaches have to come in, be able to teach things really, really quickly. And they have so many guys and such little preparation time that like they have to just put kids in position to like execute something pretty quickly. And so I think coaches overcomplicate the game, to be honest with you. But I think it's that we have one game, we have 5 to 6 days to prepare. We have 150 guys. How quickly can we get this thing rolling?
Yeah. It's interesting. Was there a coach when you grew up who you feel like kind of hit that balance between the physical and, for you, maybe the life side, right? When I talk about the life side, I mean, when a kid shows up at practice, he's bringing his whole life with him. And if coaches can see that, if coaches know that, with 150 guys, it's hard to focus on all of them at once, but he can focus on one or two at every practice, right? So did you have a coach who saw you and the whole life you brought with you to practice?
I don't know if I ever had any coach that saw the whole life. And I don't necessarily have that expectation for coaches to do that. What I do expect is for a coach to be organized and structured and have a methodical approach to development, a system, a way of doing things. And I'm fortunate enough, I don't think I'd be who I am today if I didn't play for one of the greatest high school football coaches in Massachusetts state history, and his name is Tom Lamb. Came from a Division I background as a coordinator, won a handful of state championships with Doug Flutie. Doug Flutie went to school.
Yeah, get out.
And I'm very, and so there was a rich legacy. But beyond that, he was a guy that got a taste of the college ranks and recognized this isn't for me. I'm about the development of kids. I'm about the
Mm.
development of community. And so from the youth level, Pop Warner, E-team, all the way up to varsity football, the town of Natick had a way of doing things. The whole community was on board. If there was a kid that didn't have the resources, another kid on the team's family would look out for that kid. It was
Wow.
like the school, the teachers were on board with, oh, that kid's a good football player. We have to make sure that this kid is stabilized so that he can go do what he does, so that he can get an opportunity to play in college. Unfortunately, they didn't emphasize the academics maybe enough,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
the community was all on board and trying to allow every single kid that had the potential to go to the next level get there. And so from his second stint at Natick, I believe, which began in 2000 up until 2010, which was my senior year,
Hmm.
we probably had over 50 kids play college football, which is really unheard of in
Wow.
Massachusetts. Multiple state championship appearances. And Coach Lamb, who's still, running around at 70 plus years old, running camps, he still contributes to the high school. Still a vital role plays a vital role in all of Massachusetts high school football with his structure and his leadership. That is what I was exposed to. And so when I went to college and went
Mm.
to other programs and was around pros, I expected that to be the standard for everyone
For
else.
everybody. Yeah.
I
Were you
was
surprised?
unfortunately, sadly mistaken, but it wasn't until
Yep.
this summer, actually, where I worked at camp with my high school coaching staff, and I was like, I've been all over the country. I've seen a lot of ball. I just
Yeah.
want to let you guys know that you guys are doing a phenomenal thing.
Yeah. There's something special here, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And one thing I just wanted to mention, one thing that I recognized about great coaches and strong teams in all sports is that a lot of players that are a member of like good teams tend to go on and be really successful in other aspects of life
Mm.
because that experience that they had with that team and that coach shaped.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. And I'm sorry, was it Coach Lamb or
Coach
Lan?
Tom Lamb.
Tom Lamb. He sounds like a guy I'd love to learn more about. And it's an interesting approach, right? And again, with American football, I keep saying American football because I have a lot of soccer people, but in American football, you have to have a level of structure and discipline in your coaching if you want to be successful, because like you said, could you imagine, I saw this last night, there was at least 40 or 50 ninth graders, right? Like managing them, just the number of pubescent males and keeping them focused and having them remember what the plays are and knowing when to go in and when to come out and all of the discipline that goes along with that. So I can see that this idea of structure and discipline of expectations is just paramount for a team, for a sport like football. And the rosters, they get bigger as you go. But it's an interesting point because it's some of my other conversations. There's been a focus on, kind of having an idea of what the kids got going on at home. Not that you can fix it. Coaches aren't responsible for fixing kids' home lives. They aren't. But on a smaller scale, if you got 12 people on a roster, 15 on a roster, you can get involved in that one-on-one stuff. But what I'm hearing, and what I think is pretty unique for football, is this community aspect, right? Coach Lamb was not going to be able to know Antone Wilson's every issue. I'm sure he knew you well enough personally, right? I'm sure he took the time to know his players. But to have a community and a culture that kind of flows back and forth between the way the football program is run and from the leader of the football team, right? This is the Coach Lamb, flowing back and forth to the community that responds to that, and where the players help each other. I think that's pretty unique, and it sounds awesome.
Absolutely. It takes a village. It takes a village to build a strong team, strong community. And I believe that that's this militaristic component to the game of football, which is why it resonates wholeheartedly here in America. Large numbers, group of people structurally coming together for a common goal, emphasis on physical fitness,
Mm.
and you have to be very, very tactical in your approach.
Yeah.
Just the sheer high number of members of the team make it very, very unique, in which you're going to get more parents involved, and you're probably going to have larger crowds at games, which lead to more monetary gain, which means there's more at stake. And then
Yeah.
it's a trickle down effect.
Yeah. And that really good point. I've been to many sports games, I'll say soccer mostly, where it's basically the parents of the kids, right? There's not a lot of other people who are maybe grandparents, but it's not like a huge student section is coming to the, I don't know, the boys varsity game, unless they're like, top teams but just regular average teams, they don't really do that. And it is now that trickle effect where there's more money, more people, more intensity, I'll even call it. How does a Coach Lamb stay grounded and not get carried away with I got to win every game. I'm going to do whatever it takes to win, even if that crushes kids? How does he not get carried away with that?
He was a guy that actually never discussed the outcome of the game. Same with Bill Walsh, legendary coach of the 49ers, who wrote a book called The Score Takes Care of Itself. And so Coach Lamb would always let us know what our approach is going to be to that game, what our strengths are, and what we're going to have to emphasize, not turning the ball over, not making stupid penalties, knowing how to line up correctly. And it was like those small things and attention to detail, in which if we just focus on that, and it sounds so cliche, you hear a lot of great coaches say this, but it couldn't, be more closer to the truth. And it's you focus on those things, and let's focus our own internal battle. Let's prepare like crazy, practice hard, and most certainly be more conditioned than the other team. Yeah. And off of those variables alone, you're in a really good position to win.
Yeah, because by the way, pretty much everything you just said are what I call controllables.
Yes.
Right? And everything, your conditioning, your attention to the detail and how you line up, being disciplined and not getting called offside, right? And not doing stupid penalties. And of course, there's always an element of that. We're talking about teenagers, right? I watched this game last night. There were about 97 turnovers. It was hilarious, right? I loved it because it made it really fun and exciting. The center snapping the ball over the quarterback at least 5 times in this game. It was crazy. But those items are things that one can control. I'm going to check that book out and list it in the show notes. So you took this experience from Coach Lamb. And by the way, and maybe let's pause before we get into your coaching career. Well, you didn't have the perfect home life. Or maybe you did, but you came from a background that maybe football was really more. It was just as important physically as it was in your life development. Let's put it that way.
It was my entire identity. It was my entire identity from 7 to 23. Now I'm gonna say I made that choice. I was a smart kid. I could have did well in school. Football was just everything in the town of Natick. Also was exposed to it quite a bit. My dad played semi-pro football when I was a kid, and I was on the sideline at the age of 5 years old.
Soaking it in, yep.
I just had a lot of exposure to it, so I didn't want to do anything else. But I came from a single-parent household for the most part, and so that was my outlet. Now I wasn't, chasing girls, doing other things. I wasn't doing the school thing, but football kept me grounded, and it allowed me to make a lot of friends. And people did nice things for me. It made me incredibly entitled. Most certainly, which allowed me to understand the landscape of players and the players' perspective in our modern society. But my commitment to the game from a very young age really set the stage for my life and what it would demand if I wanted to be successful in anything.
Wow. So you used a phrase when we talked last. You used the phrase that football saved your life. Tell me more about that.
Yes. I would say, although, my dad was a good role model, I wasn't in the household much because my mom were separated. And my mom was a working professional and provided absolutely everything I needed. And I had a great childhood, never needed anything.
Awesome.
And my parents' ability to co-parent me. I'm an only child. I changed environments quite a bit, changed schools a lot, moved around a lot, multiracial background, also minority within my school setting. And just, was looking for answers, was always very intellectually curious and could communicate really well. However, I feel like there were a lot of paths that I could have gone down. And I saw a lot of people that were very close to me through all different phases of life go down these paths. And, I had some of the same interests as them. I was into the same thing, but it was football. It was knowing that line,
Yep.
staying within bounds,
Yep.
in which I wasn't going to cross that because I was never going to jeopardize my ability to play. Now, my grades weren't good enough to get me the scholarship that I wanted out of college initially, but they were good enough to keep me eligible. And
Yeah.
so I always tinkered that line. But I would say that if I didn't have football, who knows where I veer off into. And
Yep.
that's why I think it's so important for all people. Granted, I was maniacally obsessed with the game in my pursuit to getting better, but having your thing, your outlet, your escape, I just obsessed over because that's my nature. But because I had that, I feel like that kept me straight and narrow. And beyond that, it allowed me to develop a work ethic. And those are things that you can't necessarily teach.
No. Well, yeah, and as you said, you take them with you your whole life. And it's funny because my wife sometimes refers to me as having soccer OCD, like kind of the way you just described yourself. I watch it, I think about it, I analyze it, I understand it. When I was a kid, I was just playing all the time. Granted, I was the youngest of three boys. My older brothers were not really into sports. I was the only one. And we didn't have a TV. My parents, I mean, we had a television. We never had cable. We never had any video games really to play. And we didn't have all the distractions that kids have today, obviously, growing up in the 80s and 90s. But as a result, what I found was kind of just how you described it. Soccer became this focal point for me. I could go outside almost on a daily basis and juggle a ball or kick it against the curb or do whatever I want for hours. And that's one of the beautiful things about the world's football is you can go by yourself with a soccer ball and be content for a really, really long time. A little bit harder to play football by yourself, but you can always, you can run and you can lift and you can do all those things on your own. And by the way, as an aside, this is back in the day where we played football in the street. We played wiffle ball in the street. We played all the sports all the time, right? Because we didn't have a lot else to do at home. But this focal point of a sport developed my brain in a lot of ways, and it developed my confidence and my skills. But I think, and you mentioned this about identity, and this is where I want to go. It became my identity that I am a soccer player. For you, you were a football player. And then it's at a point you flipped and said, I am a football coach. And I played soccer in college, but I remember there was a time where, and in fact, it wasn't that long ago, where I tore my meniscus in my right knee. I was playing indoor soccer with my high school kid, right? And it was 9:30 at night. I broke all my rules. I never play after 9 because your brain shuts off and your body thinks you're still young and you hurt yourself, right? I broke all my rules because I wanted to play with my kid. I tore my meniscus and I got surgery. And I remember the moment where I'm like, I am no longer a soccer player. And it sounds silly. Of course not. I'm in my 40s. Of course I'm not a soccer player, but that identity sticks with you. And it's very powerful image that you develop for yourself as a kid. And that when that moment came, I'm like, I'm no longer a soccer player. I was depressed. Like it was hard for me for probably at least a week. I'm like, what am I then? Which is silly because I'm a dad and I'm a husband, and I'm a person of faith, and I have all these other things, right? I'm a lawyer, whatever. But that one gets right to my heart because I think it was such a big part of it. Have you had that moment where you're like, I am no longer a football player? Have you seen that, like that challenge to your identity?
About 2 or 3 times. And at 31 years old, I feel like I've reinvented myself about 3 different times now. I do want to, before I dive into this, I just want to say that is incredibly powerful for you to have all those things going on at that point in your life. This isn't like you're a young man transitioning to you got to develop as a professional. You're a father, a husband, and now you can't play soccer. The fact that it's having that sort of psychological impact on you, wow.
Yeah.
That's profound, which really puts into perspective. Think about people that have a lot less going on when they lose the game and the difficulties in transitioning into the rigors of life.
Really good point.
That's a real challenge that I don't think gets enough notoriety and discussion amongst the public. But
You're
no, so
totally right. Yeah, and after you tell your part of this, I want to come back to that because I think that's a really interesting topic. But go ahead.
yes, absolutely. So the first time was I went to a junior college because I said I didn't get the school thing right the first time. Did very, very well academically there, and I found myself at a university, Salisbury, down in Maryland, Ocean City,
Yeah.
Maryland. And when I went there, I got turf toe in camp,
Uh,
and so that knocked me out for about 8 weeks. Now, I
uh,
had that happen before any of the other students were on campus. Now, when the students arrived, I was expecting to be a starter, a 3-year starter. I went there as a JUCO transfer, big fish in a small pond. That was my whole,
mm-hmm.
my plan, was to go there and do well right off the bat. When all these new kids came on campus, this was the first time in my life. I wasn't Antone, the football player. They have, the kids rumbling, oh, that's like our
Yep.
running back, and he does this, and he went to this school. He's from Massachusetts, and I'm unique. I'm just a guy in a walking boot.
One more.
And
Yep.
I have nothing going for me. I talk to girl, well, who am I? I don't know.
Oh,
There's nothing that interesting about me.
yeah.
Usually my entire life, people wanted to be my friend because I was good at football. I
Yep.
dressed well and I was perceived to be cool. Well,
Yep.
now I'm in a walking boot. I'm not playing. I'm a redshirt transfer. So I'm 20 and
Yep.
all the juniors are seniors and all the people who are like my class are 21
Yep.
and older. So I can't hang out with them. And I'm like, and I live off campus, so I'm not around the younger group of people.
Yep.
And so I fell right in the middle with no crutch of a sport in a
Mm.
state where nobody knew me or even had proximity to where I was from to develop some notoriety off of my past reputation. And I collapsed.
Mm.
I sunk into a depression. Didn't really talk to anybody. Went to go seek counseling on campus. Went to see the school's
Good for you.
psychologist. And that really set the stage for the transition in my life. I decided to leave that school. I
Mm.
transferred to a smaller school at home. I changed my phone number, and that's when I decided I'm going to become a person. I was
Wow.
like going to a smaller school. I still think I have a chance at that point in my life. I still thought I had a chance to play professionally,
Mm-hmm.
but because I decided to develop as a person, I began to have outlets. And I also want to mention that we talked about coaches and people that had a profound experience on you. At that school, which was a blessing for me, was that I met a man named Jim Berkman, who was the all-time leader in NCAA history for lacrosse. And they've won
Wow.
over 10 national championships. And I had him as a teacher, and my minor was coaching. And that's when I established that I wanted to be a coach, watching how he operated, the relationship that he had with the students,
Yes.
how
Yes.
detailed he was. And so it allowed me to begin transitioning to, okay, football is just this game, but I'm going to do that when I'm done playing. And so it softened the load as far as dealing with the mental rigors. It's like, okay, I can't play or I might not play forever. I knew what was next. And that
Yeah.
allowed me to have a vision for the future. However, when I transferred to my new school and I had the reputation, I was the new transfer and a lot of things were going for me off the bat and I was far more socialized. I
Yep.
blew my knee out for the first of 3
Oh,
times.
come on. Oh my gosh.
Yep. And it was at that point where I started really looking within, reading books, figuring out how was I going to be the best coach possible. Started getting a ton of internships, started doing public speaking. And that's when I started viewing myself as a leader and an educator in pursuit of trying to develop a name for myself as a professional and try to, bridge the gap between sports, leadership, and business, which is the path that I'm on now.
Yeah.
And upon tearing my ACL again, the second
Same
time,
knee. Same knee.
yep,
Oh my gosh.
where I was like, okay, where can I take it now? Like this football thing is definitely not happening. How can I continue to develop? And I'll expand on my story later, but it was like I got it taken away from me, but it was almost like the injuries were like a buildup of prepping me. So that it was like after the second one, it was like, cool. I wanted to do this football thing. It didn't work. Next step. And I prematurely got exposed to what life would be like without football, as opposed to if I had gone pro or things went really well. And then, okay, I can't play pro anymore. And I was 25, 26. I'm really scared for where I think my life would have been at if that happened to me at a later point in life.
Yeah. Wow. A couple things come to mind. First, would you have been in a position to have made this transition the way you did once those setbacks came if you hadn't had Coach Lamb in your life, if you hadn't had Coach Berkman in your life, if you hadn't had a mentor or at least role models like that? How would you have reacted to these setbacks?
I couldn't even tell you. Because those were such vital moments in my life. Not to mention, my junior college team won a championship.
Oh,
We
wow.
had 4 or 5 guys go in the NFL, played for another phenomenal head coach, Todd Vasey.
Mm-hmm.
Phenomenal program. He had to put together a team full of 120 kids from all over the country that all had academic issues and came from very, very difficult backgrounds.
Yeah.
So that was another profound experience that I just sort of skipped over.
Yep.
But all those coaches and those leaders, knowing that I wanted to be a coach, which is from the exposure to those guys, really just allowed me to just double down on my professional development.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this will really resonate. I wanted to become the coach that I felt like I needed from an interpersonal standpoint. So my goal was to be that coach that everyone felt like they never had, that really understood them and was really open and accepting. And so I really shifted my focus after the first setback and understanding this is how I'm going to have to pivot moving forward. And then as different hurdles in life began to occur, I just really tripled down on what my endeavors were.
Yeah. We're all going to hit these setbacks. And when I say that, that's a very adult thing to say and a very adult thing to think. Well, we're all, nothing's perfect. We're always going to have problems and nothing's always going to go your way, all that thing. Kids don't think that way. Kids think I'm going to be a pro, right? They think just you and I both did this, right? We lived it. They don't think that way. And if I can tell you a quick story for myself, my third son has been an outstanding soccer player, really, really good, and has viewed himself this way. And he's done the training, he's fit, he's strong, kind of the whole package. And he went to Brigham Young University, and I don't want to take too long on this, but I played there 100 years ago. He was really excited to go play there. His dad played there, kind of that whole thing. And I never put any pressure on him. He could choose whatever he wanted. But Brigham Young University is a great school because it's like $5,000 a year in tuition. Forget sports, right? But if you're paying that much money anywhere, you're doing good. But he went there, he trained, he prepped, and he walked on, right? There was 80 walk-ons and a bunch of people coming back. And bottom line is he didn't make it. He made it to the very last cut, and then he didn't make it. And it was tough for a couple days. And he texted me and he said, "Dad, how do you deal with it when someone tells you you're just not good enough?" So we had a conversation, and we talked about some of the heart lessons that I've been talking about on this podcast, and we'll get into those later maybe. But here's the point. 2 weeks later, he texts us, the whole family chat, and he's like, I thought that all I was doing here was soccer. Like this was the reason for being here. That's all I've wanted my whole life. And honestly, after I didn't make the team, I'm having a blast. He's like, I got these great friends. They want to play soccer all the time, but they don't really care about being on the team. They have similar morals and standards as him. He's having all these great experiences. He's loving his classes. He's super disciplined, right? He gets up early. He makes his food. He gets to class. He's done with all of his homework and studying by 3:00 every night, right? He's like on it. And he goes, I'm really happy. So that's that story, right? Hey, kids and coaches and parents, we need to be a little careful about how hard we drive this idea of you are an athlete. Because as we all know, we are not athletes forever. And these kids are going to face that transition, right? They're going to face that setback that then challenges the I am an athlete identity that they've built up, but we have also kind of encouraged along the way. And you just hope maybe if we teach them along the way that the sum total of their value is not derived from what they can do on a field or on a court, right? Or on a mat. That's not where their value comes from. And your value and worth as a person doesn't go up or down based on your performances. And if we can teach them these types of heart lessons, like how about your battle is always against your lesser self? If you teach kids these things along with teaching them the sport, giving them those opportunities, when that inevitable come to Jesus moment happens, and you got to face either your physical frailty like you did, like I did, or the fact that you just didn't make the grade, or whatever else doesn't work out, you can fall back on, yeah, but I know who I am, and I know my worth as a person, maybe as a son or a daughter or whatever it is in that community that you come from. Imagine you've coached a lot of kids. Imagine a kid that you've coached, if they knew those lessons, how it maybe would have changed or impacted their own experience playing sports.
Yeah, and one thing I always try to lead off with, especially when I'm addressing a new group, is my personal testimony. And life is going to hit you, knock you down, but what's going to define you is how you respond.
Mm-hmm.
However, you have to go through life anticipating that there is going to be adversity. And the sooner you can get exposure to failures, heartbreaks, the more it's going to harden you and allow you to adapt, being able to respond under pressure. Not just athletics, but I believe all endeavors in life. Being able to respond to adversity and handle pressure, those are what are going to define you as an individual. And so sports are just my medium. I define myself as a leader and an educator, first things first. I'm coach to, the people around me, but those are the hats that I value most. And I try to use my medium of sport to say, this is a simulation of what may happen in life. Like in basketball, I'm going to take 100 shots. Through repetition, I'm going to get better. You got to pass the ball. You got to share. You got to be selfless. You got to play your role. In baseball, you're going to strike out. I love baseball because you strike out so frequently.
All the time.
You go on a slump. The more exposure you can get to that crappy feeling of failing, the more you can accept it and put your heart on your sleeve and just put yourself out there with no fear of the outcome whatsoever.
Yes.
And that's when I think we can tap into our true potential as human beings, is where we let our mind go and we just perform because we love what we're doing. And that love, that innate passion, is what our job as coaches is to bring out in our athletes. Because if they aren't having fun and working well with others and, playing for their team, then what are they doing it for, really? And that's the lesson that I believe is lost, not just in football, but unfortunately in a lot of sports in our modern society.
Yeah. Boy, so I wrote down anticipate adversity. That is a nugget right there. Anticipate it. Not just I'm going to prepare you to deal with it, but mentally expect it. Expect it. One of the heart lessons that I teach is you can play with joy and freedom when you're not afraid, right? When you have no fear of failure, you play with joy. Have you ever seen a player, whether it's football, any sport, have you ever seen a player that they're just, they are having the time of their lives and they're not afraid to make that mistake? They know they're going to. Have you seen a player do that? I mean, can you tell the difference in their performance or in their attitude or anything?
Well, I guess it's an intuition. I can identify that player in body language before they get on the field. It's a confidence, it's a demeanor, it's an approach, and that comes from preparation. However, that hesitation, that sort of disruption in an athlete's psychology, more often than not, is rooted to external factors, whether it be parents' pressure, fear of the coach's feedback, or they have this expectation on themselves where they're tied to their performance and statistics. So they're playing this game of like, I got to get these numbers as opposed to letting the flow of the game come to them. It's the athletes that are truly liberated that can generally perform the best because they are in tune with the sport. And I believe that athletes that are in that mental state where I say you're in tune, you're in that flow state, that's where the great ones live. And you have to get to that through relentless preparation, repetition, and conditioning yourself. And like I said, failing. Knowing
Fail.
what the situation will entail so that nothing is going to come off guard when it occurs in the game. So I believe that to play with joy and play fear-free is something that you have to work up to.
Yeah. Yeah. No, yes. And this is something I think we should do a little like how to on for kids, right? Write it up somehow, really teach them. First of all, kids don't understand. They don't have the vocabulary to say, I play free from fear or I play with joy. They don't know that, right? All they know is that they're like, I'm in the moment, right? I'm in the groove. But to understand that that comes from somewhere, that's on us as the adults who are working with the kids to teach them, set them up in these situations where you can anticipate adversity. You can, and we want you to. We're going to build it in. Okay, I'm building that into my practices that you are going to fail. And we're going to talk about it. And then I'm going to smile at you and be like, hey, man, you know when you just lost that one or you just missed that shot right there? I'm so thrilled because you know how that feels, right? You know how to adjust, right? And you notice that no one's yelling and screaming at you because we're happy you failed because now you have an opportunity. But this is a job for the adults involved with youth sports. And I don't think the adults know how. And this is where I'm going to tie this into this game I went to last night, okay? I'm sitting about five rows up in the bleachers. And it's typical stadium, right? They got a fence between the bleachers and the field. And there's probably 5 or 6, probably half a dozen dads prowling the fence, moving up and down, hands gripping the bar, yelling out to their kids, calling instructions, getting on everybody, saying all the things. And I compare that to some of the other sports I've been to. There's I'll take soccer. There's no dads prowling the fence. And here's the culmination of that experience was the quarterback coming to the fence where his dad was after every touchdown or when he's coming out. He comes to the fence and his dad's coaching him. As a coach, I would be like, abso-freaking-lutely not. Absolutely not, right? Okay, fine, but that's just me. This intensity of the parents and this like engagement level, but then pulling the kid away and getting maybe that kid, but the kid wanted it. He wasn't getting called over. He wanted it. He went over to his dad. So, and I'm not throwing shade on this dad or that kid. I don't know all the details, but just observing it. How are we as adults helping our kids play free from fear if they hear us yelling and screaming at them all the time? They hear us criticizing mistakes. They hear us saying, well, why'd you do that? Or don't do that, or do this better. How do they play free from fear if the voices in their head are those from their moms and dads from the stands?
The first point I wanted to make, which I believe is essential, is that as a coach, I need to have a parent meeting prior to the season. And this is what the expectation is going to be. I'm the coach. I've been doing this for X amount of years. This is my background. This is my expertise. These are the way my practices are going to be conducted. This is the standard I'm going to hold your child to. If some kid has a dad that may have played quarterback in the NFL or coached at a high level, I would love their expertise and I'd love for them to contribute. And we are aligned in knowing what is expected of their son playing that position. This is what their rules and their checks are going to be. So if you're going to assist them, this is how we're going to go about it.
Right.
What
in
I
structure
understand is when there are too many voices. You got a private coach, you got a strength coach, you got a skills coach, you got your dad, and then you have your head coach, and your coach is giving you the system, and this is what you have to go out there and execute. But this, all these different people said these different things. Why that's even acceptable is totally on the coach, because now you're actually limiting your quarterback's ability to be successful because he has all these other optics that he has to worry about in his mind. I think that parent involvement is also prevalent in football off the sheer fact that there's so many guys on the team, as I said before. And so parents think that there's a high likelihood that if their kid's kind of good, they can get a scholarship or an opportunity to play. And then also, if it's turbulent economic times, well, that parent's like, I need you to get a scholarship because I can't pay your way to school.
That's right.
So there's money at stake.
Pressure.
Or, unfortunately, I have some family members where I see this in the baseball domain, where they have to go to all these summer camps, batting practice. So now the dad's putting pressure on the kid, like, we got to get a return on this time. Yep. Now the kid's thinking about, do I got to perform? Do I got to get a scholarship? And so that's where the noise comes in. And noise is what disrupts performance. So as a coach, but if you have an underpaid coach or a coach that just does this part-time and they have issues going on in their life, how do you expect the coach to have this awareness for all these different dynamics to then understand the psychology of their players to silence the noise? And you can't silence everything, but to the best of their ability to create a learning atmosphere.
Yeah. Manage the noise. Yeah. Yeah. Boy, yeah, this is really it. So noise disrupts performance. Wrote that down. Man, you're full of nuggets, dude. I'm not going to steal them, but I am going to use them and give you credit. And parents, and we'll wind down a little bit with this. Parents, start thinking about whether you're helping or hurting, right? And I'm going to show you some. Well, I'll tell you one more story from last night, and this is what I mean. So it was my nephew, and I was sitting there with my brother-in-law and my sister-in-law, his parents. Great people. In fact, he was on a podcast I did 1 or 2 episodes ago. He's a wrestling coach, wrestler. And he's the kind of coach you want your kids to wrestle for. He's this kind of coach we've been talking about. And his son is the smallest kid on the field. Smallest. He's been wrestling at an elite level since he was like could walk. So he's super tough. And the coach wouldn't, in the beginning of the season, coach wouldn't play him because he didn't know him and he was so small. And then he got in, he plays safety. And he can tackle people like you wouldn't believe, right? Like he's fearless. He's like a honey badger, and he knows how to take people down because he's been tackling, takedowns for his entire life. So he's an awesome kid, and he just works and works and works. And I have these wristbands that I make. I'll put them up to the camera a little. Maybe I'll share. It says KidFirst fan, and then on the back it says, I don't know if you can see it, it says, I love watching you play, right? And I give these to the parents when I do parent workshops. And I say, I'm like, you don't have to wear these, but if you do, it's a really cool reminder of why you're here, what you're doing. So I'm talking to my brother-in-law, and he goes, hey, you need to ask my wife about her experience talking to their son, Shane, about these KidFirst principles that we've just been discussing. And she turns around, I get my video out, and we start talking. She's from Alaska. She hunts bears like with her bare hands. She is a tough woman. She's like the fish whisperer. When she goes fishing, she just tells the fish to come to her, and they do. She's an amazing woman. And she said, well, after that last podcast you did, we've been talking about it. And I went to my son, this is the freshman, and I said, I love watching you play. And she's not really a crier, so it wasn't like she was getting teary, but you could tell that this was something that was very heartfelt. And her son looked at her kind of blankly and was like, what? It was tough for him to process, because generally when they talk about sports stuff, it's, well, here's how you could be better, or this is something that you missed, or this is something you did really well, or whatever. It kind of talking about his performance. And when all she said was, I love watching you play, he started off blank, and then he recognized what she was saying. And he's like, really? You do? And this was the moment. Both his parents then turned to me and said, well, by our actions, he should have known that we love watching him play. We go to all of his games. We cheer for him. We provide for him. We do all this stuff. He should have known. And they said, but he didn't know until we said it. And this was this moment. It changed the nature of the parents' relationship with their child who plays sports. Those simple words. So I leave this with the parents and say, you have heard unbelievable wisdom from Antone. Right? These are some incredible insights as a coach, as a parent, as a player. Remember that your kids, they're kids. They don't know that you love to watch them play until you tell them. All they think about is, I want to please my mom. I want to please my dad. I want to be good enough for them. If you tell them, I love watching you play, you're telling them, you're good enough for me. I don't care how you played. You're good enough. And I am honored and privileged to be part of your life in this way. So I'll give you the final word.
Yeah, one thing I challenge adults to do, by the way, that's incredibly powerful. Again, what you're saying, and the demand of just hearing it. I find that to be so important, positive reinforcement.
Mm-hmm.
And so, my challenge to adults is this. Think about what you do in the workplace. Are you a part of a team? Do you like your job? If so, why? If you don't, why not? How frequently are you told that you're doing a good job? And that impact that positive reinforcement has on you. Whether we believe it or not, kids seek validation. And regardless of the difficulties of their sport or what they have going on in life, not just children, but really all people, it's important to recognize success, and it's important to display your appreciation. And when you do that, that goes a really long way. Sometimes I know for me, I had older gentlemen tell me that they thought I had a real ability to be a strong global leader. Someone told me this when I was like 12 years old.
Yep.
And I didn't necessarily think anything of it, but those words never left my mind. And then I started believing it because someone else saw it. And so they allowed me to then recognize it. And you never know what words that you say to someone may be the difference in changing their life to allow them to go down a path that they may have had some hesitation. And you just provided them that little nugget of confirmation that they needed. And so in youth athletics or any team dynamic, because working with executive team or, a small business, military or sport, I'm trying to draw the parallels between all these team dynamics. And, letting people know that you care about them, letting them know that you appreciate their efforts, and letting people know that we're in this together regardless of the outcome will allow us to feel secure, and that will have an inevitable impact on our ability to succeed.
That's awesome. Well, Antone, I got to say, this has been one of my favorite episodes. You have clearly put a ton of thought and work into understanding what it takes to lead people and to coach people. And as you said, a leader and educator, you put those two things together. I'm not sure a good leader would ever consider themselves not a good educator, right? Those are kind of two sides of the same coin. This has been amazing. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for sharing your insights. Here's the two ones I'm taking away. Anticipate adversity. Coaches, parents, teach your kids to anticipate it. It's coming. Know it. Embrace it. Don't fear it. And parents, don't clear adversity out of the way for your kids. Good grief. And the other one, noise disrupts performance. Noise disrupts performance. You want your kids to do well. Let them clear their head. Okay. Don't be in their ear chatting and yelling and screaming. They should hear good, beautiful, positive things from you. Antone, I'm so glad that we're friends, dude. I hope we can be friends and talk again for a long, long time. I think you're going to have an incredible career. By the way, Antone's doing some amazing stuff in his professional career. We didn't get a chance to talk about that, but I will put a little bit of that in the show notes in the health tech space. And we'll maybe talk about it on another episode. Might have to have you back. But thank you very much. Let's wake up, football people. Let's be the first ones. Let's be the first ones to get out there and say these things and live these things and frankly expect these things from our coaches. I'm Coach Dave with the Kids Sports Podcast. Is it Kids Sports? The KidFirst Sports. Man, I don't even know the name of my own podcast. The KidFirst Sports Podcast. We'll talk to you soon.